Welcome back to Privacy by Design, the AI podcast. Today, the race to deliver AI products is all about speed, but moving fast without embedding privacy is a gamble, with 93% of organizations still lacking fully embedded AI governance. In episode 1, Responsible AI Starts with Trusted Data, we talked about the 3 options companies face: lock everything down, ignore the risks, or adopt smarter data privacy practices. Smarter practices start with data discovery, classification, and remediation. This approach is the fastest way to scale responsibly. By addressing risks up front, you avoid the patchwork fixes, brittle models, and stalled adoption that follow when privacy is bolted on too late. In this episode, we're focusing on risk and efficiencies, how embedding privacy from day one reduces hidden costs, keeps teams moving faster, and helps AI products succeed beyond the first launch. Joining me is Mike Logan and George Barroso. Together we'll explore how organizations can balance speed, privacy, and performance, and why doing it right the first time keeps you ahead in the long run. When companies lock everything down or ignore the risk, what is the most costly mistake that you've seen?
When they lock everything down, nothing works. They don't make progress. They get frustrated. They give up.
What happens when they give up?
Their priority, they end up not accomplishing their goals as far as AI is concerned. So AI doesn't deliver its promise. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you keep tripping over security issues, you have to keep, you kind of start, stop, and I don't know, you don't get very far.
Have you ever seen these mistakes where it costs a product to shut down, or what's the worst case scenario that you've seen?
Mike already mentioned it was just abandoning the project. Can't get it done, so we'll just shift our focus to something else.
And that product could have plenty of potential.
You outsource it because you figure somebody else can figure it out, but you can't.
Right.
Okay.
That's pretty common, which sometimes they can, but they break all the rules.
And then outsourcing that, does that typically end up costing them more?
Yeah, costs more, and it reintroduces other security or privacy issues, right? Because
it's riskier, right?
They have to share with them.
If you're outsourcing that, you got to send data to the third party.
So you've just added risk by not trying to put risk in the first place.
By not putting up a process that keeps data private. Yeah.
Okay.
Lockdown works for certain scenarios. In production environments, you have to lock it down because you can't mess with the data there. It's the actual operating data that you need.
Right. Company depends on it.
Yeah, and so you have to lock it down, and you spend a lot of time and effort and money and people and tools and everything to make sure that it's all secure and people can't hack in, and exfiltrating data, and you're monitoring it 24/7, and there's real costs associated with that. Now, if you try to go and lock down a development environment, best case scenario, you spend a lot of money monitoring and checking it 24/7 and making sure that the people that are accessing are appropriate. And worst case scenario, actually prevent developers from accessing those environments because they're not supposed to have access to the data, or you can't offshore it if if that's your model because it's real data and you don't want to take that risk on. And then you basically limit yourself as to what you can actually get done to just a group of people that you feel comfortable enough to allow to see all of your customer data in the clear.
Okay.
Right. So, maybe that list is 100 developers, right? You may have 1,000 on staff, but you don't trust all 1,000 to be doing what you need to do.
Right.
Or you're monitoring all 1,000, which I hope you have the budget for it.
Yeah.
Right? Because in production is one thing, because those are the actual, applications a company runs on. But when you start to, multiply that, whatever it costs you in production to lock it down and monitor it, pick a number, $1 million a year, whatever it is. Now you've got 3 development environments that you have to get through before you can get to production. You just quadruple your cost.
Right.
To do the same thing in your non-production environments. We have clients with 10 development environments. 10 times the cost to monitor and lock it down doesn't seem feasible.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, it's expensive, and they may not be able to do stuff.
Right.
In non-production, you should be able to do a lot of stuff that you wouldn't consider doing in production. So, if you've locked it down, it usually restricts what you can and cannot do, and those restrictions can be, basically they could kill the creativity, if you'd like, or efficiency of the developers.
And for industries or clients where time to market matters, all you're doing is increasing time to market when
Right.
you lock it down. Because now there's all these hurdles you have to go through.
So you're killing creativity, and you're increasing risk through needing to maybe outsource, and you're increasing expenses, and you're increasing
Slowing
time
it
to
down.
market.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times it goes like a pendulum. So you go from, if you lock it down, you go from one extreme, you get so frustrated, you unlock everything. You go to the other extreme, and then, inevitably you have a data breach.
The pendulum of doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because if people get so frustrated, they just go around it, right?
Right.
The business gets to the point where they say, look, we have to have this, our competitors are doing it, and, it's not working, so we're just gonna do an end run around it, and, we'll ask for forgiveness when we're done. And, if they're successful, it's they're heroes, and if something happens, and nowadays, there's the risk of something happening is gone up.
Outweighing the, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a riskier play than it might have been in the past.
Right.
Doesn't mean people won't do it; they'll still do it. But
Right.
I think there's a smarter way.
There is. Well, we have a guide for it. All right. So if a company insists we know where our sensitive data is, what question would you ask to prove whether their discovery and classification are real?
I mean, I don't know that we could prove it, right? Like how, if I ask you, you tell me you know something, I say, prove it. Like, I don't know. That's kind of not really a conversation we can ever have. What we can do is provide examples of where customers and prospects we work with thought they knew where their sensitive data was, and tell them how we found other stuff they didn't even realize was there. That's a real scenario.
Okay.
But if someone's convinced they have, we do discovery and we have it all, okay?
Maybe they do.
It's possible they do, right?
Right.
I
I mean, when they get audited, they'll find out.
right.
Sure.
But that's too late, usually.
I mean, is there an opportunity there to say, well, tell me about your discovery and classification solution? Do you know what the model is? Do you know how it's?
No, they're probably using some tool. They've invested maybe a lot of money, data dictionary where they track all the data elements, or 360 customer view project where they gathered all this information, or they bought a package, and the package claimed to have it. So they may have a pretty good handle on the bulk of the data. I think it's usually on the edges where things go sideways, or they're sharing data with other apps, or they buy some app from another vendor and they need all this data and they just pump it out. That's where things usually start going sideways, and that almost happens inevitably, over time. It's like, day one it was secure, maybe it was 100%. We've done a lot of projects with clients where they say, oh, we have a data dictionary, we know all the data elements. Yeah, as of 4 years ago.
Right.
Right. Or maybe there was some problem when they did a deployment to production, and some DBA created a backup of a table and forgot to remove it, and it's not in your data dictionary, because why would you have Sunil's backup in your data dictionary? You wouldn't, because that's not a real table. You just took a backup that day because there was some problem and they needed to fix something and forgot to remove it. And then that get propagated to all the development environments, and nobody realized it was there.
Yeah.
Right.
Extracts, little flat file, somebody pulled a bunch of data from the database into a file because they needed it for something. Legal reporting, legal reports come up every, that's a bit of a fire drill.
The legal hold thing, yeah.
Yeah, people, they have some kind of lawsuit and they have to gather all this data and they put it somewhere and somebody forgets about it. But you have to keep it for a while. Some companies are pretty rigorous about that. It's a separate place, and if they, if they're familiar with that particular legal issue, after a few lawsuits, they probably, they do it. It costs money, but data can proliferate in lots of interesting ways.
Right.
And they're not always well known or easy to find either.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What's the hidden risk that always shows up later when discovery and classification are skipped?
When they don't try to figure out what their sensitive data is?
Yeah.
Chaos.
I mean, it's a pretty clear one, right? Like the data's there, it's in the clear, you give it to a developer who might be a contractor working for, or a subcontractor working for one of the vendors you work with, or, one of our clients actually was working with a third party, trying to outsource something to a third party vendor. The third party vendor said, if you give us a backup of your database, we will, do our thing to it and then show you the results. So they did. And that vendor put it up on the cloud, and then that got breached.
Oh, no.
And then that actually blew back on our client. Not because they didn't do anything, right? They shared it with a third-party vendor that was supposed to secure it. The third-party vendor didn't secure it, or whatever they did, they got breached, and that data got out. Right. So, I mean, that's the risk, right? If you don't have a data privacy process or program in place.
Fair.
When you share a copy of that data somewhere else, you lose control of it. Doesn't matter if you've got a legal paper that says they're supposed to secure it.
Yeah.
It's still out there.
It's out there, and
Piece
the
of paper is
reputational
worthless.
risk, what are you going to say?
Yeah.
Like, oh, your data's out here, there's a breach, all your customers'
Yeah.
data is out in the clear. Oh, well, the vendor did it.
It's not our fault.
Sorry.
It's not our fault, the vendor did it. Doesn't matter, you're still responsible and you're still going to pay,
Right.
right?
Okay.
For LifeLock or whatever that monitoring stuff is, you're still going to have to deal with the reputational risk. So that's the real risk there.
Okay. So I wanted to move into balancing privacy and performance. So once you start embedding privacy, the question I think you've said to me that you always hear is, won't that slow us down or weaken the model? So I wanted to dig into the trade-off between privacy and performance and whether that's real or just an excuse. So my first question for you is privacy degrades performance a valid concern or an excuse to cut the concern?
I think it's valid.
It's a valid concern.
Depends how you do it.
Right. So I think it's absolutely valid. Anytime you're adding a process or a step to a process, you're adding time, right? Does even maybe masking only takes an hour to do, but that's an extra hour, right? And if you're worried and waiting for your data for 10 hours and then you add an extra hour, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it does. It depends on how quickly you need to move. But you can design a process that mitigates that, minimizes the impact to the developers.
So when we're talking about setting up these processes, it's not that you have to set it up brand new every time you want to do something, right? You're setting it up in the beginning, and then that is able to spread out to all of your projects. And
yeah, so today, for example, if you have a client who, their process is when the developers need data, we take it back up from production or grab one of the backups we already have and just, give it to them to refresh into their development environment, right? That's a very simple process. A lot of companies follow that. One of the companies we were working with actually had that scenario, but their database is very large. The restore took 10 hours to complete. And that's if the DBA team dropped everything and only worked on that immediately,
okay.
which they would have to do when this particular important team needed the data. So it became problematic because it takes so long to restore, and they had to do things to it after it was restored, which took them 24 hours. So just to get a usable development environment was taking them, if they start immediately, as soon as they request it, takes 34 hours, right?
Right.
That's what, a day
Almost
and a
a
half, almost 2 days. Right?
Oh, if they don't sleep.
if they don't sleep. Right.
But almost a week if you do sleep.
Yeah. I mean, so the idea here is, can you then introduce a 3-hour masking run on top of that? Or is there a way that you can structure the process so that, you don't have to wait for 34 hours after you put the request in, right? So we had a different client, and we did solve that problem. We used a series of tools, and their wait time went from 34 hours to 1 hour.
Wow.
Right? But that is because of the process we put in place, doing, decoupling that refresh and the masking from, their request. We had another client who, the DBA team was frustrated because they didn't know if the development team was going to need data or not on a daily basis. And whenever the development team asked for data, it became a big problem because they immediately escalated and they didn't want to wait for it. They wanted it immediately. I don't understand. Why does it take so long to get me the data? But they had to go grab the backup from production, move it to the place where they wanted to restore it. Then they had to run their scrambling scripts on it, which took an hour or two. Then they had to restore it. And so, you put in a request in the morning, it might be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon before you get it.
On a good
and
day.
They were complaining.
Yeah.
Correct. And they were escalating to the manager, and it became a big thing. The DBA said, can we do a process? Can you help us put a process in place so we don't have this much wait time? So what we did was we put a process in place that basically ran overnight. After their batch cycle ran, they had 5-6 hours that nobody was using the system. And we put a process in place that would do the refresh and the remask every single evening after their batch process completed. So in the morning, if they said, oh, we need mass data, all the DBA had to do was, here you go, restore, which took 30 minutes or an hour. And so they had it by 10 in the morning, as opposed to waiting until 1 because they just started working on it when they got the request. So there's ways you can structure that process and kind of decouple it from the actual kind of delivery at the last mile to the people that need it to kind of minimize the impact of putting a secure process in place.
Okay. That sounds a lot more efficient.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Can be.
Should be. I mean, if you want companies and teams to adopt the process and not fight you the whole way, it has to minimize impact.
Has to be easy. Yeah.
If it's difficult, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if it takes too long, then they're going to look for, as Mike said, the end around. They'll look for ways around it. Shortcuts, or we were working with a big bank in the UK, and their process for getting, approved to have data put into, data protected and put into development, it took 6 months to get through. So no team did that.
Right.
They just filed for an exception from the Security Council every single time
Right.
to get real production data in, because it would take too long to get the regular, the protected data in.
Right.
Because the process was so onerous and took so long to get through.
So on the flip side, can you share a case where Privacy First has actually improved a model accuracy or adoption or?
Accuracy, no.
Accuracy, no. Okay. Right,
and that's a tough argument to make. Hey, if you go and mask your data, it'll actually give you better models. No client will believe that. Right? Every single data scientist is going to tell you they need the real data to get accurate models.
Okay.
But you can make sure there's no impact to the accuracy of the model by choosing the right way to protect the data.
Right.
If you go in and you use encryption and you change all the data in the fields to scrambled strings, that's not going to help the accuracy of your model if you need those data elements.
Right.
Right? But if you're doing a de-identification or obfuscation where, names get replaced with names, but it's no longer the real name, to the model, it still looks like a name.
Right.
So it's still going to flag it as a name. It's still going to have the same result, but you're not using real data.
Not a real person's name.
Right. So is that, in that case, that would maybe help the adoption of a...
Adoption, yes.
Okay.
Right. Well, so the biggest risk now, and a lot of our customers actually are worried about this because it's filtering into all of their legal documents with us is, asking whether or not we're going to use any of the data we come across from them to train models, because they don't want their data in somebody else's model. Right? And then there's certain scenarios where they don't even want to use any tools that have it in their, as part of their tool, because they don't want it in their environment with access to their data. So, having an answer for, oh yeah, well, don't worry, because all of your data is going to be masked, so now you can put it into your model. It's de-identified. You don't have to worry about, whether there's going to be some exfiltration or issue with the model sharing some data, because it was never real to begin with. It was already de-identified. It was already considered safe.
Okay.
Before it got put into the model, but it didn't affect the results, because names still look like names, and addresses still look like addresses, and phone numbers still look like phone numbers.
So it's still...
It's just no longer the real values associated with that customer.
Right. So you still have all the value without the risk.
Correct.
Okay. Have you ever had a case where it was easy to convince an executive, or to your point, a data scientist, that embedding privacy is cheaper than fixing it later?
Then fixing it later, yeah, it's cheaper.
Yeah, everybody knows it's cheaper.
Yeah, do it right once or do it twice.
I don't think I've ever met any executive or developer that thought that it would be easier to deal with a breach than to have, protections in place.
It becomes somebody else's problem, however, that sometimes is...
It's not their problem anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
It's legal's problem, or whoever, right?
Or the product team trying to get it out the door.
Right. So they don't care, but nobody ever thinks that it's going to be cheaper to just let it lie. Now, I have seen customers who are looking at it and saying, in order to put this process in place, it's going to take us this long and slow us down on these projects, and the cost of that is more than if I got fined. I have seen customers do that math.
That logic,
And say, well, we'll just run the risk.
Yeah.
We'll take the risk, because right now we can't afford to budget for that.
But to your point earlier, Mike, the odds of being breached are higher now. So is that changing in terms of how frequently you hear, oh, we'll just run the risk?
No, it's still the same.
People still think about it. They go through that exercise. I mean, it's going to cost me this if I get breached, if I don't. But the benefit is, if I make more money, skipping, it's a business decision at the end of the day.
Right.
Which is, it's not really a long-term business decision, but short-term, we've seen it happen. And I think part of that issue is that there's no good solutions either. It's usually when people are, they look for solutions, they can't find anything that they think will work, and then they weigh the pros and the cons.
Right.
Which I think now they're, with solution tools that are, some of the software products that are coming out, there are solutions, and they're not that onerous, and they at least give you a lot higher degree of security than, doing nothing or crossing your fingers, hoping
Throw
security by
caution to the wind.
obscurity is not a great plan.
Right. Okay. Awesome. So in terms of regulatory readiness and future proofing, I have a couple questions on the EU. I know that we're in the US, but a lot of US companies are working in the EU, so a good conversation to have, I think. But performance isn't the only pressure. Regulations are catching up fast, and while some companies gamble on waiting, others see privacy first as a way to stay ahead. So if we could talk about how governance and compliance shape efficiency, I think that would be great. So my first question is, for companies that wait and see on compliance, what's the long-term risk they're blind to today? We can take a minute.
Long-term risk they're blind to if they wait and see.
Yeah. Is there I think some of the outcomes will probably be the same, but do you think there's a bigger risk to just waiting to see what happens with AI regulations? Like, we don't necessarily have one regulation in the US for AI, but the EU, it does have their AI Act coming. So does it make sense to maybe in the short term follow the EU's guidance and think that maybe some of those standards will be replicated in the US, or is compliance in the US typically just completely independent to that of what you might see in the EU or anywhere else for that matter?
They're similar in spirit. I think the EU tends to be a little stricter probably
Yeah, and I think,
historically.
so I do remember when GDPR first came out, we had some clients that were concerned about that and wanted to protect, their, make sure they were protected. And that was before they had all the, documented fines, because they knew the fines were coming. So they're like, okay, we got to deal with this, right? But what was interesting was, when we got to do that project, we figured, okay, we'll de-identify the database, this whole system, and then you guys are safe. We're like, well, no, we don't care about the US. We just want to do this for the EU people. It was an HR system. We just need to go change those things for the people in the EU. We don't want to touch the US people. Because they thought that was going to be better for them. It was more costly, but that didn't matter because the people who were working on the system wanted to minimize how much was changed. They didn't want anything to change. And so they only dealt with the EU stuff. And then, of course, when all those privacy laws came back in and started, then they had to go back and redo it to cover everyone. Where they could have done it right the first time, right? Like, you do it once, or you do it twice, or you do it 3 times, or however many times you want to go back and revisit this. If you put a process in place early, it's generally less costly, right? Especially if you're adopting AI internally. You decide, well, there's no regulation that tells me I have to protect my customers' data, so I'm just going to go use regular data, right? And you start building stuff on top of it, putting processes in place. And then some legislation comes in a year later. Now you're going to go back and change the process. You've been working with it for a year, optimizing it. Now you got to change it and redo all that work.
So is there an argument to be made that if you were to bite the bullet and follow EU AI regulation, in the long run, everything will be safer, and then you might not have to go back for your US?
That's possible. I mean, it depends.
If you can do it in a inexpensive fashion. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It really is. It's all going to come down to cost and time, because time is money, right? And how long will it take them to put that in place for their particular company? What is the cost of that? And do I want to invest that now or kick the can down the road?
But kicking the can down the road seems kind of short-sighted, but I hear what you're saying.
It can be, depends. It depends. It really depends on the specific client and use case. Sometimes kicking the can down the road.
You could hope that AI will solve all your problems and you won't have to do anything.
Right. Kicking the can down the road might be fine. Right? It might be, okay, so it costs me 10% more 5 years down the road than now, big deal, right? Or it could cost 5 times more, depending on the client.
Okay.
That depends. So they're going to have to do the math.
Yeah. The death math. Okay. And so I think we kind of covered my second question, my second and third question, but if you were designing a governance framework from scratch today, what's the first checkpoint that you would build in to ensure efficiency? Any thoughts on that one?
You mean like if we were putting a process in place, what would be the first thing we check?
Yeah, like if you were thinking about the pitfalls that companies have gone through and you had the opportunity to help design a governance framework, what would you say would be the best first step for efficiency?
I think it's always discovery and classification.
Discovery and classification.
What you do to your data, right? You need to, no matter what your decision is to how you're going to treat it, you need to know where it is. If you don't know where it is, what are you going to do after that? There's nothing to do. Like, you don't know if you have an issue.
How big is the problem? I don't know.
Right. Is it one database? I've got one application that has customer names in it. It's in one place and that's it. That's an easy problem to solve.
Yeah,
right?
easy.
Now, what if you have 100 systems or 1,000 systems running? Which of them have data that you need to be concerned about? You know, and we talk about data privacy and we focus on names and addresses, but I mean, there could be other things that companies think is proprietary, right? If you're a pharmaceutical company, whatever formulations you're working on currently, you might think that is, you know, I need to protect that from my competitors. I don't want people to know my trade secrets. There's other data that could be considered sensitive that have nothing to do with names and addresses.
Right.
Right? So understanding, you know, what sensitive data, you know, what is sensitive to my company and my business, right? What is our competitive advantage in trade secrets that we don't want to get out? And where does that exist so I can make sure I protect it appropriately? Right. Even if you're locking it down, you have to do that. Unless you decide to lock everything down. Right.
So on this podcast, we try to be fairly neutral and just stick to the subject matter, but I think it's a good opportunity to make a quick plug on the C2 data privacy platform with the model, because I think earlier, Mike, we were talking about, well, we can extend the model or we can, you know, build upon the model to say this data might not be relevant to company X, but it's definitely relevant to company Y. So could you maybe talk about the capabilities that a data discovery and classification solution should have in a modern business environment?
Should have. I mean, it should be able to find all the common sensor data elements, and it should be able to be extended to find custom stuff, you know, client-specific stuff. You can train it to say, hey, I want to find out, you know, I want to look for any place we store formulations or algorithms or any kind of business secret, any kind of, or even schedules or certain logistical information that might, I mean, Apple's famous for, you know, trying to keep the secret around, you know, their product releases until the very last moment. And sometimes they're good at, sometimes they succeed, sometimes it leaks. I assume the reason they're secretive is because they feel like financially it makes a difference, right? Sure. So, you know, and because everybody's going to copy what they do, or anyway, there's a lot of copycats in the world. So, yeah, I think you need to have a product needs to be able to handle, you know, not just the easy stuff, but also some of the more edge cases, if you like.
Right.
Probably a little bit more of an investment to A, find products that do that, and B, configure them potentially, because it starts getting, data can get pretty complicated.
Right. It's dynamic. It's very dynamic.
It's dynamic, it's changing, and it's, you know, it's complex, and it tends to, you know, the whole thing around inference data is another level of complexity that, you know, talking about names and addresses doesn't even touch.
Right.
So.
Okay. Great. So my next topic for you guys is privacy by design versus a bolt-on, which I think we just talked about a little bit, but now, even with regulations looming, a lot of companies still try to bolt privacy on at the end, but anyone who's seen that movie knows it rarely ends well. So if we could compare for a minute what happens with embedding privacy by design versus patching it in later, I think that would be valuable. So it's almost Halloween. What's the biggest horror story that you've seen when privacy was bolted on at the end, or even late?
I mean, I think I already alluded to the worst that I've seen was that UK bank, because, you know, they wanted to protect the data, but the process to do so, you know, to get an application team to get approval for that to be moved to their development environment was so onerous that every team filed for an exception. So they got real data into their developers. You know, developers using real data to develop. That's probably the worst case, because it completely, like, great, you got a program in place that nobody was willing to use.
Right.
You haven't solved anything.
And how much money did you sink into that?
Right. So what they hired us for was to come in and help them streamline that so that, these application teams didn't look at getting an exception. They wanted the exception process to be harder than just getting mass data into their development environment, not the other way around. Because if you can't get adoption and you can't get developers to use it and they just always try to go around you, then there's no effect. Your program has no effect in that case.
Right.
I mean, the worst case is they have a breach, and then, they panic and they lose 2 years basically doing, damage control.
So they've spent 2 years maybe building something, or even 6 months, whatever it is.
Or whatever they built didn't work. I mean, whatever they may have bought a bunch of products and left them on the shelf.
Right.
Forgot to implement them, or
Right.
didn't have the resources, or didn't have the time, or it wasn't a priority. It was always the sixth
Or
thing.
we gave it to the application team, but they didn't use
They
it.
didn't use it, yeah.
Right.
We didn't force them to use it.
So
We did an exception.
One of the clients we were working with had decided they want to put a program in. They already had a program in place. And then they wanted to optimize it, so they switched out some of the pieces and kind of reworked the process. And so we went through, and it was a significant change for them because they were moving to virtual databases from physical databases, right? Physical databases took, that was the 10-hour example I gave. And now they could get a virtual database in an hour. And so some teams were all about it, right? And
Right.
they had, I want to say 300 and some odd application teams that were onboarded to their process. And I would say at least half of the teams started using it right away.
Okay.
And were all about it. There was no resistance from them. We had some teams who said, well, this doesn't work the way we've designed our system, so we're not going to use it, and decided not to use it. I want to stay on physical. Okay, keep using physical databases then, that's fine. And there was a facility for doing that. And then there was another group of application teams that had it, but never bothered to look at it. So for 6 months, they did nothing with their mass data. They just didn't. Oh yeah, I don't have time to look at that. Until the executives came around and said, okay, we're going to get rid of all the physical environments. You have to use the ones we've provided. And then they were like, well, I don't have any. No, we gave it to you 6 months ago. Oh, okay, how do I log in? Right? And they had to use it.
Right.
But they eventually did, right? So that's kind of what you were into as well.
How do I log in? Okay. So I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but can bolt-on privacy ever actually work, or is it, in your opinion, and you can just say ticking time bomb or not, but do you think it's a ticking time bomb?
No, I mean, bolt-on can work, it just costs
A while.
more. Well, yeah, it works for a while.
Works for a little while.
But it costs more.
Eventually it breaks.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't thought out, so you
It
just
wasn't
slap it
designed
on.
for that, and it starts to get costly, and then you start to kind of expand it, and then you're like, oh, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but now I've got 100 people that want to use it, and I don't have enough staff to support this.
Right.
Does AI change that?
Not bolt-on. Bolt-on, at least by definition, is bolt-on. AI can help the solutions be better and smarter, but you need to map the solutions to your problem. It needs to kind of...
Yeah, I don't see how AI can help that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be parts of the process or parts of that AI can help with, but, AI is a prediction engine. It's predicting what it thinks is the next, right answer or the next right token.
Right.
It's not really thinking about what your process is and then, weighing all the pros and cons and then giving you the best answer. It doesn't think yet,
Right.
like people.
All right. I think it's interesting. There's been a lot of talk about the culture and the organizational shifts, and I haven't logged into my mass data for 6 months. Where's my username and password? So technology alone doesn't make privacy first stick. It takes leadership culture and alignment across teams to make it efficient in practice. So let's close by looking at what it takes to, from an organizational perspective, get this right. What are some of the biggest organizational barriers that you've seen, and how did a company overcome it?
Adoption.
Early adoption?
Yeah.
Not even early adoption, just adoption in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so
Focusing on adoption as
Yeah.
an issue, not just throwing out some new, buying another product and wondering why people don't use it.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So
It's-
we have seen customers and clients that we work with that go off, and to Mike's point, they buy a new product and they say, we're gonna do this, and this is what we're gonna do, and then here it is, and here's your new process. And then teams are like, I don't have time for that.
Right? It sits on the shelf, doesn't get used.
It's not gonna wait, it's, we have this presentation where we kind of have I guess, we call it appropriated, the Kubler-Ross
Yeah.
stages of grief, and, we call it the stages of data masking or data privacy, and, where people are always first is denial, right? Anger.
I don't need that data privacy.
Yeah, like it's gonna slow me down, it's gonna break my application, this will never work.
Yeah.
Da, da, da.
You don't understand how
There's-
complicated it is.
Our stuff is very different than everybody else's. And
Yeah, it's
like
unique.
at the end of it, all of those arguments always come up. But the reality is there's so many companies that are putting data privacy programs in place, masking, de-identifying data, and using safe, secure data for their development practices that it doesn't hold water. I mean, they're not that different. Yes, they might have some unique things in their data, but there's solutions for that. There's always a solution, right? So I think there's always that resistance to kind of a change in how things work today. Nobody wants their process to change.
Right.
The process is known. Today it takes me this long. I know that if I put in a request, I can go have coffee for the next 4 hours and not worry about work, right? I have that in my schedule. I know exactly what to expect. And now you're telling me that I have to put in a request and might get it in an hour.
Yeah.
Some people will be like, that's great, I'll do that all day long. Other people are like, well, I don't know, it might break my application, whatever.
Right.
So I think the adoption is important, and having those folks
Automation
involved.
is another. I mean, it's
involved
got to
early.
be. Yeah, it's got to be automated for
What,
folks to
and that's
adopt
the
it.
and that's the thing that you
Save me
you
some
see
time.
with bolt-on a lot, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to write my own custom scripts. That's great. It'll work that one time, and then the schema changes and your scripts break, and now you got to go back and fix them. Or this other team wants to do something similar, and they're sharing data. Now
Right.
you got to make sure your script handles that new database type over there, and your old database type, and everything's consistent. How you gonna, like there's all of these things that kind of start to become more onerous to keep working, and it costs you more, it takes more time, and it's just not going to be a solution that you can live with for very long.
Right. And I would think even like if people leave a company and they were the people to build it in the first place, that knowledge is
The bolt-on
gone.
tends to fall apart when those people leave. Yeah.
Right, because
Right.
the tribal knowledge is gone.
It's
Exactly.
And I'm sure they documented it, but the documents
Oh, yeah,
make no sense.
documentation.
Yeah, or
And
it's
the
lost.
documentation is focused on operational steps
Yeah.
and tasks, and not on why you did a specific thing a specific way. And so and then you make a decision later on, why are we doing it this way? It'd be easier if I just did this. But you didn't know that they tried that and couldn't do it because of some unique thing in the
Right.
data, and they had to do it this more, difficult way, because that's the only way that the data would work between the two systems. And you lose that knowledge.
Right.
So there's a lot of that happens too.
Okay. Have you seen an example where privacy first companies actually win deals faster or adoption because of their stance on privacy first?
I don't know about faster, but they're the company with the best data privacy, especially in some industries like financial services, usually succeeds. I mean, that is a criteria for most leading companies.
Okay.
They check it.
Right.
Insurance companies check it too right now. If you want to get
Insurance
insurance,
companies definitely check it.
if you want an insurance policy, they start asking, do you do this? Do you do that? And they just blanket you with all these requests, which may or may not apply. But the fact of the matter is, you need to know your data privacy process needs to be pretty well documented, explained,
Right.
and suited for your business.
For that policy to be even granted to you.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about regulatory pressures, right?
Yeah.
And you have to do this because of GDPR and AI. We have,
Business pressure. Yeah.
we were working, exactly. We were working with a client, financial firm in New York. They wanted to expand into Europe. And they were having conversations with, prospective clients there and trying to sell them on their services. And the client's like, well, how do you process our data? Where does it go? Right? Now, there's no regulatory requirement for them. There's nothing that said that they must protect the data that they're processing, right? There's no specific requirement, under GDPR for the particular things that they were looking at, but their actual customers were like, well, you're processing this where? It's in your data centers in the US?
Right.
No, I don't want you to send our data to the US. It needs to stay here in Europe. And so they looked at the cost of standing up a data center in Germany, right, to service the EU, and compared that, and they said, it's going to cost us $10 million to do that, right?
Right.
And then we came in and gave them some alternatives on how they can protect data before they send it to the United States, so they wouldn't have to stand up a new data center in the EU. There were certain functions, obviously, they need to keep there, but
Sure.
they wouldn't need to move an entire, copy of their processing engine from the US and have another copy in the EU and somehow keep everything in sync. They wouldn't
Right.
have to do that if they could send the data. And so they actually put a data privacy program in place with us where we would tokenize the sensitive portions of the data that the customers were concerned about before they sent it to the US. And it stayed tokenized the entire round trip. And then when they got it back in the EU, they could go in and detokenize it to see the full clear data set and clear again. That had nothing to do with regulations. There was no regulation that forced them to do that, right? There's regulations around it, making sure you encrypt traffic when it's going back and forth and all this other stuff, but there was the data that they wanted protected didn't fall under, EU GDPR rules.
Okay.
But they were getting pressure from their clients, and so the only reason they were able to actually land those deals was because of the process that they put in place. And this process was not for non-production data. This is a production use case.
Right.
They're using this live every single day to get data from their clients in the EU process. And the client said, we will not give you our business unless you have a data privacy process in place for this.
But the good news is, when they did it, they got the business.
Right.
Made a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was worth the time and effort.
Oh, yeah.
Really.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Do you know how that company is doing today? Like, have they?
I do know that additional business was somewhere on the lines of $1 or $2 billion extra dollars that they didn't have before. So yeah, they're still doing fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for
that
them.
process is still there.
Good for them.
What is it? 7 years later.
Wow. Excellent. Okay. All right. So my last question for you guys today, and this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time. But if a CEO asked you, how do we get speed without shortcuts? What is your one-line answer?
I don't have a one-line answer.
There's no
Automate.
one-line answer?
Automate. Automate as much as possible,
Yeah.
for sure.
Automate.
Okay.
And AI helps you automate.
And build this data privacy, build it into your process to begin with, from the beginning. Because then you can optimize it so it doesn't slow you down.
Okay.
Because if you try to add it later, you've optimized your process for whatever the process, whatever it was before you bolted on some other tool. And now you're just adding something at the end.
Right.
Versus make it part of the process the entire way. It minimizes the impact. It doesn't slow you down because you will learn to optimize every step of that.
Okay. Excellent.
All right.